So, without further ado, let's go over one specific thing that you guys are going to be learning. You guys can see this? So we're going to continue talking about higher order. What's up? A little bigger? Yeah. Good? How about now? Too big? I think that's good, right? So, let me write you guys an example, and let's go over and see what's going on through this example. So let's say you have a function, and we're going to make it a higher order function. So what does that mean? Yes. So in this case, this function isn't going to take anything, but it will return another function. And we'll say says hi. And we'll define says hi up here. Sure. So function says hi, and this is just going to console.log a string hi. Right? Oh wait, but this will be called calls says hi. Okay? So this function, calls says hi, is not taking anything as a parameter. You don't pass anything to this function. Even if you do, the value you pass, nothing will happen to it. This thing is just returning a function. It's just returning says hi. The return value of calls says hi is that function. So, if you say let what is this equal to calls says hi, that's such a bad name, invoked, and we console.log what is this, you got a function, and the function's name is says hi. Everybody see this? You understand, right? That call says hi is returning a function. This function is not being invoked, it's just returning the function. So in this case, what is this becomes this function. What is this is now equal to says hi, because call says hi is returning that. So you can call, so what is this is now the function. So if you if you just say, what is this, what is this, and you invoke it, you get hi. Does everyone understand that? Would you like me to walk through that again? We have two functions. Says hi, just console logs hi. Everyone good? Then we have another one that says calls says hi. Well, let me just say return says hi. Returns says hi, okay? And what that's doing, literally, if this function were to be called, it's going to return this function. Without any open and closed parentheses next to this, says hi is not going to be invoked. It's literally returning the entire function object, okay? That entire function will be returned if this is called. So, if you set a variable, what is this, and you set it equal to the invocation of return says hi, so now return says hi is running. And this variable, what is this, will be set equal to whatever this returns. So what is this will be this function. So you can just call what is this down the line however many times you want, and it will be says hi. So what do you think will happen if I invoke that? just the function. So before we do this, what?
Are we talking about the block of code below says hi, like that includes console on and
This block of code is the function says hi. This is says hi. This entire thing, lines 2 to 4, is says hi, the function. That's where it's defined. So this function, return says hi, is returning lines 2 to 4, this entire thing. So if you set this equal to what is this, because what is this, it's saying, hey, I want what is this to equal returns says hi invoked. So whatever returns says hi returns. Whatever this thing returns, because you're invoking it, will be what that is. What is this?
So you're saying that right? Because what is this is just a variable, right? So like you're saying we can write that.
Well, what is okay? But like, what is
That as an argument to something else that'll list
if you pass what is this?
like console on.
What?
You're saying
If you pass what is this after you define it to this into another function, that would be passing. Well, no, because this is now a function. So you don't have to put it into anything. It's a function. You could put things into this. Like if this returns a value, like if this is return high, you could say let high equal to what is this invoked. And then if you console.log high, it's high. You get it? Because you're setting this value, what is this, to whatever this is returning. And what this is returning is just a function. It's not invoking it, it's not calling it. That means what is this function that's being returned. So, and this function is this up here. So what is this is now equal to this. So you can call what is this, and you'll get whatever this is running. So in this case, when you're just defining something as a variable, this is what that means. With this, you're defining the variable and setting it equal to something. You're assigning it a value. And that value is this. This isn't just a variable declaration. This is also variable assignment. And that value that is being assigned to what is this will be the return value of this function. Returns says hi, it returns this function says hi. So now, what is this is equal to this function. So you could call it and say hi. But since I'm saying that this will be equal to the return value of this function, what if you invoke says hi here? Everything will break. Do you know why? It's because says hi returns nothing. Says hi doesn't return anything. So if a function doesn't return anything, what is returned implicitly? Undefined. So that means that this is basically equal to undefined. So if this function is now returning undefined, then that means that what is this equals undefined. So when you console log what is this, you see that this is running undefined, and you also see hi before that, because this function is still running because you're invoking it here, but it doesn't return anything. So it just console logs hi, does nothing, returns nothing, undefined. So then now what is this is equal to undefined. So if you try to invoke something that isn't a function, this is what you get. Type error, what is this is not a function. Does everyone see this? Oh, it's kind of hard to see, but That's what's going on.
Just to clarify, you're not invoking something, and it's going to say function. That's the time. And it's going to say the name. That's something.
Yeah, if you wanted to console log what it was. Like if you were to just console log, instead of what is, if you were to just here, let me do this. Let me do this. If you were to just console.log says hi, you get the function. If you console log the name of a function, you get the function. So here, when you console log what is this, since you're setting it equal to this return value, which is a function, that's why you see this over here. And that's why hi is running, because you're invoking it here. Sure. But okay. Everyone good? What's up?
Still invoke says hi on line 7, and we fix that by changing this console.log.
You can't return console. Well, oh wait, can you do that? I've never returned a console log before. Okay. Because console.log is like technically a function. Well, I mean, not technically, it is. It's an object method on the console object. Don't worry about what that is at all. You never need to know what that is. So basically, since this is returning this now, what is this is equal to says hi. Wait, oh wait, but you're invoking this. Oh no, it still doesn't work. Okay, never mind. Yeah, you just can't do it. Well, you can't return a console log. If this was to return hi, you still get an error because, I mean, this is no longer, what is this is no longer undefined, right? What is this is being console log on line 12, and it's hi. It's a string. So if you're trying to like invoke a string, you get a type error. It's not a function anymore. It would be a function if this one was also returning a function, but like, why show you that? You know? Because then it's just going down and down and down. Type error is because, yeah, the type error comes up is because you're trying to invoke something that is not functional. You can only invoke functions. So now, let's do something different. Let's say I have two functions. Let's say I have this function, and its function says hello, and this function takes a name. Okay? So now let's say that in here we define another function. And this function will also take a name 1, a different parameter. Well, I'll call this name 1, I'll call that name 2, right? And I'll call this function says goodbye. Okay? And inside this function, we will return, we're just going to console log. We'll console log name 1 says hello, but name2 says goodbye. Okay? And then we're going to pass says goodbye. And then we're going to invoke says goodbye, excuse me, with markup. I'm just going to do that, okay? Then down here, we'll say says hello with Nick. So now, Nick says hello, but Marco says goodbye. This function that I defined inside of says hello has access to the parameter up here. It will also work if I say let's name 1 equal Nick. And then you just don't pass anything in here. So the function still has access to it. You understand? If you define a function inside, it'll have access to the outer parameters inside of this other function and other variables declared in it. That's scope. But since this is what we're talking about functions, this is referred to as closure. Okay? This is closure. The fact that this function has access to outer variables and parameters of the outer function, the fact that that is possible is called closure. Okay? Huh? It's just that fact. It's just that fact when it's relying on functions explicitly. Okay? It's not like scope talks about any kind of block. Like a while loop inside of that, a for loop inside of that, if stated inside of that, that's like all like scope stuff. But this, when we're talking about explicitly functions and parameters and stuff, that is closure. Okay? You can think of it as scope if you want to. It's kind of the same thing, except it's not. It's closure. Is everyone okay? Like, this is console logging name 1. Name 1 is not in this function. Says goodbye has no recollection of name 1. But name 1 is defined in the outer function. The fact that this can access this value is closure.
And that's connected to like, something about this being a function that allows that to occur, or it's not function specific. It's not something.
No, closure is, I mean, it's really all about scope, but since it's inside the function, it's function. Closure is function. The word closure is about like, you know, when you're talking about how inside of an if block, this, you can access a value defined outside of it. Not say closure, you say scope. Okay? You could think of closure being like scope for functions, but it's specifically how the inner function has access to values and parameters, because also parameters, you know? It's not just values, like a variable definition here. It's also if I were to pass it in through there. That function has access to that. Because I'm calling it with markup down here. So you invoke it, and it has access to name 1, and name 2 is something I'm passing. All right. Let's go to the slides. So we're going to talk about returning functions from functions, and we're going to talk about closure. That's really all we're going to talk about in the part 2 of higher order functions, okay? Everything else that you just learned before is the same. But now we're going to talk more in depth about what returning functions actually means and what closure actually is. So we know that functions can return values, right? So function returns a string, returns string, I am string. And you could set that to a variable and return value, and that variable will now be equal to whatever returns a string is returning, which is I am a string. So if you console log return value, it's I am a string. Who has a problem with this? Cool. So now, in the previous unit, we learned that functions are like any other value in JavaScript, right? So if functions can return values and functions are values, then functions can return functions. So this is kind of like the example I just showed you. We define a function up here, greet me, and what that, if this were to be invoked, it would just console log hi. Okay? And then you define another one, get greeter. Get greeter, if this were to be invoked, would return greet me. It would return the function. Notice that we're returning the function. We're not invoking it. So you say let greeter, you define a variable, and you assign it to the invocation of get greeter. So get greeter, when that's invoked, that returns greet me, which is this function. So now greeter is essentially greet me. So if you console log type of greeter, console log greeter, and then invoke greeter, you get a function, that's the type of, and then you get that thing with the brackets, the function colon greet me, the name of it, and then you get hi, because you run. I just showed you this, guys. Who's still confused by how this is working? What are you confused? What happened? So basically, we have two functions. The first one, the top one, is just console logging hi, if that were ever to be run. And if this one were ever to be run, it's just going to return the function, the whole function, not invoking it, just the actual function. So if you set greeter equal to get greeter invoked, this function runs and returns this function. So greeter is now set to the return value of this, which is this. So greeter is this. Greeter is now this, pretty much. So if you console log type of greeter, console log greeter, invoke greeter, get function greet me, and hi. What's up?
So is greeter assigned to the same reference memory yesterday, or?
It is.
Okay, so if you then named it Justin to greeter, needed.
Yeah, see, I don't know if once you define a function, you could you shouldn't really do this. You shouldn't access the function. You would actually go. But yeah, so this is a complex value and it is assigned by reference, but don't worry about reference with functions really. That's more with arrays and objects where that becomes really important to remember. Okay? So what happens if we invoke greet me? Right. We get all that nonsense that we got that I showed you in the replica. Since you're setting greeter equal to get greeter invoked, so that means that this needs to have a value, right? For this to be something. Get greeter returns greet me invoked now. Now it's invoked. It's not just the function. It's invoked. So this function runs. It doesn't return anything. It just console logs hi. You get the hi, but it implicitly returns undefined. So this returns undefined. So this is undefined. Console log greeter, it's undefined. Type type of greeter, it's undefined. You invoke greeter, you can't because it's undefined.
Essentially, does this just mean like you cannot return? You're not returning anything when you console log. That's like basically what.
Yeah, when you console log something, you don't return anything.
Right.
It's just gonna print a sentence in the terminal. But the reason this throws like a crazy error at all is because we're trying to invoke greeter. We expected that to be equal to this function, which, if you look at it, it looks like it is. But since you're invoking greetme, it's not. That's the gotcha, okay? If you don't invoke this function, this works fine. Greeter becomes greetme, and you can run this, and then this will run, and then blah. But since you invoke it, that's just not how it works anymore. Now it sets the value that greetme is returning, which is nothing. And if you try to invoke that, you get a type error. Okay? Because greetme, like this is saying you agree that this is going to run, this function's running, right? And it's saying return this, right? And this is being invoked, right? So greetme runs. Yeah, you're invoking it. So this is running, it's fine. But the return value is nowhere. There is nothing to be returned. And then you try to invoke something that doesn't exist, and then there you go. Cool. So, you could do this too. You could basically just define greetme inside of getGreeter, and then return greetme like this. And greeter will now be set to this function that you define inside, and you can invoke it, and it runs fine. But if you were to invoke greetme like that, then the same thing would happen. This is literally the same example, except it's written in a little different way. Is everyone okay with this? Instead of defining greetme outside of getGreeter, it's defined inside of it. So, that looks like a typo for whoever wrote the slide. Sorry, that's embarrassing. I didn't write the slide. Yeah, there should be a curly brace here. Just imagine this is a correct syntax function. And that's what's being returned. But it's literally the same thing as before. It's just that you can define it inside the function and it still works.
For some reason, it's right in the.
Oh yeah?
Just go to the workshop.
Oh. Whatever. Yeah, even now, there's like no N here. You see that?
Yeah, sometimes it glitches. I noticed it.
Oh, this is missing like a whole line. Wait, what the fuck? Oh, for some reason it's not showing up on the monitor. Let me try and... Yeah, you see? What the... Can't like zoom in here. Oh. Okay. So you can even return an anonymous function too. So this, you're not defining a function anywhere, and you're not calling it. But you're returning an anonymous function, so this function will run. If you just return an anonymous function like that, it is going to run. I don't know why you would want to do this, but you have the option to, if you want to. So it works the same way. You see, it still says hi over here. You can't really see it. But when you set reader equal to the invocation of this, it returns this anonymous function. So now greeter is equal to this anonymous function. So if you invoke that, it's running fine, okay? And you can define functions like this, with just two open parentheses, equals arrow. We call those fat arrows. Then the curly brackets, and then your function logic. It's the same thing, okay? For the most part. So what if our returned function takes a parameter? Well, if we set this variable greeter equal to getGreeter being invoked returns this anonymous function, right? There's no name. The function definition is happening in the return statement, right? But this function this time takes a name, and it says hi name. But since greeter is being set to this function declaration, greeter becomes this function, and you can just pass greeter, Mary, or Rosalind, or whatever, and you'll get, can't see it over here, but you'll get everything you want. It's the same thing. Hi undefined happens if you don't pass anything to it, because this function takes a parameter now, and it says hi, whatever that parameter is. Okay? So before we talk about closure, let's review how scope works with nested functions. Inner functions can access variables defined in outer functions. So I showed you this before. Name is Mary. Let says hi, function. Console.log, hi name. Says hi. Greeter. This is Madonna. Greeter, hi Mary. That's what happens, right? Function greeter, if you run it, it defines name, and it defines says hi, which is a function that console logs name, and then it runs says hi. So when greeter is run, you get hi Mary. Okay? So closure is the fact that an inner function can still access values defined in the outer function, even after the outer function is finished running. I'll show you an example of this right now. So, let me try and play the slideshow again. So, when is getGreeter running? In this line, in this entire code block, when is getGreeter actually running? Here, right? GetGreeter is being invoked here, right? Correct? And the return value of this will be set to greeter, right? So, let's see what happens when getGreeter is getting invoked. First, it's going to console log getGreeter is running. Then, it's going to set a variable name equal to Mary. Then, it's going to console log getGreeter is finishing, because the next line is a return statement. So getGreeter will run, and then this will return, and it's going to be a function. It's going to be a function, an anonymous function, that just console logs hi name. So now the greeter is assigned to that. Greeter, if you invoke it after getGreeter is done running, it still has access to that name. And this is where closure becomes important to understand. Even though you're pulling out this function out of the return value, because the definition was referencing a variable that was defined in the outer function, even if you call this after this is done running and being set equal to this, it still has access to that name. And that's just how things are. So who's confused by that? Who's confused by why this? Who's confused at, like, why we're getting that thing in the constant? And why it's in that order?
Same equal hoisting.
No, this doesn't really have to do with hoisting. Hoisting, let me just like tell you guys right now. Hoisting, it's like before the page is, before the code is actually executed, the computer looks for all variable declarations and function declarations. All the variables are then put, those names that you're defining are then put into memory, and all of their values are set to undefined. But functions, their names are put in memory as well. But their values are not set to undefined. Their values are set to what you wrote. It's really weird, the function. But that's essentially why, that's just like hoisting. But that's not what's going on here. This is closure. This is saying that this function has access to this variable even after this function is done running. Because it sees that this is just like a variable name, right? Like greeter is a variable name, right? Like I'm defining greeter here, right? And greeter is a function. Because that's the return value of this. So JavaScript is like, okay, what is greeter equal? Because greeter is just something you wrote. It looks for what it is. Where is that function? It lives inside this function. Then it runs it, and it says, what the hell is the name? Oh, it's defined in the outer function it lives in. And that's why that works. It looks for where that function was defined. It says, hey, I'm defining this variable greeter. What's greeter? Oh, it's the return value inside of this function, get greeter. This is where it lives. And it's accessing names, because we're invoking this, so this thing has to run now, and we're inside here. So it says name, Mary, boom, done. But getGreeter runs way before that. GetGreeter runs when we're assigning greeter. So that's why getGreeter is running, getGreeter is finishing is happening up here.
Essentially, it's twice.
GetGreeter runs once. And that function, anonymous function, runs once as well. But they run at different places. GetGreeter, this whole thing, runs here when you're assigning it to greeter. But this is returning a function declaration. It's not returning an invoked function. So this function doesn't run here. It runs here when we invoke it. But when we invoke this function, we're invoking this. We're not invoking this. Just this. Cool? It's a little weird, but like, you know.
Yeah, I might be alone here, but I have a hard time understanding why invoke greater isn't invoked get greater.
Because invoked get greeter.
Uh-huh.
What is this act? What do you think this is going to equal? It's going to equal the returned value of getGreeter. The returned value of getGreeter is just this random function.
Okay.
So now greeter becomes this random function. And then you call that random function. And JavaScript is like, where is this? Oh, it's in here. So it has access to this entire function when it's running it, because it's defined in here. So the name is defined here, so that's why this works. This is the main point I want to tell you guys.
Okay.
A little better.
A little
Tiny bit better.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
At least it's a little bit better. Okay. What if getGreeter takes a parameter now? What if getGreeter takes a parameter? Oh, this is like the same thing, except we're not defining name. Like, you remember here, we're going to remove the console logs, and we're going to remove let name equals Mary. Okay? So we remove the console logs, and we're just saying, like, okay, when we're defining get greeter now, this thing is also going to take name. It's going to take a parameter. Greeter is equal to, get greeter is equal to the invocation, and then you pass in Rosalind when you're assigning it to this thing. So now, when you invoke greeter, you get hi Rosalind. I feel like this might be a little harder to understand, but it's literally the same thing. Because when you think about it, parameters are just variables that are being declared at a function's definition. And since console.log hi name is using that parameter, this function that's being returned is using that parameter. So when you set greeter and you want it to be equal to this function, get greeter takes in a parameter, so you have to pass that parameter then, not here, because this function takes nothing. You get it? Yeah? Yeah. It's not, I get it, yeah, whatever. What's next? What if both functions take parameters? So now, let's say you define this function getGreeter, like the same function we've been doing, and we say it's going to take a parameter named 1. And this function, all it's doing is returning an anonymous function with no name, but this anonymous function takes name 2. And it console logs hi plus name 1, me plus name 2. So let greeter, you're defining greeter now, is equal to get greeter invoked with Mary. And Mary is now name 1. So Mary is here too, if this function greeter is ever going to be run. Because greeter is now equal to this function. Because this is what's being returned in getGreeter. So when you invoke greeter though, since greeter is equal to this function takes a parameter as well. So you pass Rosalind into this function, and that's how you do that. So before we invoked this function with Mary and this with nothing, because this function did not take anything. But now that greeter is equal to this function, you have to pass something into it when you're invoking it. Also, you have to pass something into this one when you're invoking it, because this thing takes a parameter. You have to pass it in if you don't want these values to be undefined. It still has access to them, but you just have to, pass them in. Okay? So in this case, that function that we just made before, this is the same function. This case, think about this. Now I'm going to define two variables, introduce Mary to, introduce Rosalind to, right? And that will be equal to getGreeter Mary, introduce Mary to will be getGreeter Mary, introduce Rosalind to, getGreeter Rosalind. So now it becomes logical sense when you call these two variables, which are these functions. Introduce Mary to, pass it Dorothy. Introduce Mary to, pass it Albert. Introduce Rosalind to, pass it those two things. So then, it makes sense as to what's going to happen, right? Hi Mary, meet Dorothy. Hi Mary, meet Albert. So naming is important here. You can see how everything is logical, right? Like it's almost like plain English. Introduce Mary to Dorothy. Hi Mary, meet Dorothy. But this is the same function from the previous slide. Function getGreeter returns an anonymous function. GetGreeter and that anonymous function take parameters. So when you're setting something and you're invoking getGreeter, you have to pass it a parameter, or else everywhere inside of getGreeter, name1 will be undefined, because you're not passing a parameter. Same thing with this, with these two variables, because these two variables are equal to the return value of getGreeter with these variables passed in. And the return value is this anonymous function. So then, you have to pass in another string, which should be named2. It doesn't have a name. Yeah. If you don't give it a name, it's an anonymous function. Yeah, that's giving the name. That's defining the function. So like, you can't in your if this wasn't inside getGreeter, like if getGreeter didn't have a name, I don't think you could do that. Because you're not saying, hey, this is a variable getGreeter. It's equal to the function. This is function. Like getGreeter, this keyword, this word getGreeter is now going to be a function. So it's kind of like you could think of it as saying like let introduce Mary. Now this thing is going to be equal to this, right? You can't say like let nothing equal to that, right? But you can return an anonymous function. It's just something doing something. It's kind of more like a tool, like a one-time use tool. You know? But if you do want to pull this out of this function, you do it this way. You do set that equal to something. So you can think of this function now being called introduce Mary to, or introduce Rosamund to. But now the parameters mean different things. Does that make any sense? It makes it's like a little sense, right? It's like a little bit, right?
So yeah, like when we're doing a workshop, we're naming the function.
You should.
Whereas these are not just return function.
Yeah, you could put a name in that function. Or what? Because you can't, like, if you put a name, let's say this was greet. Function greet is this, right? And you set, like, you can't ignore all this. You can't call greet anywhere else. You get that? Because it's being defined inside this function, so the outer scope doesn't have access to it. So like it doesn't make sense to name it. You could just like say like, hey, return this random thing. And then you could set it equal later. Here. So you could call it outside. Yeah. The point of this is to pull this out, this function out, it's being returned. Call it outside. And that's how you're doing it. So we talked about returning functions from functions, and we talked about closure.
In the anonymous function, we're kind of always using it as if it has the same function as the
Well, that's because
higher method.
higher
Or
order
higher
function.
function, sorry.
That's okay. Doesn't matter.
Okay, I'm test case, I don't understand anything.
No, you see, this has to do with this, right?
Yeah.
But that's because this is being defined inside of this.
Okay.
So, like, why would this add two numbers
Right.
if it's in getGreeter? you know?
Right.
So like, if this is doing something else, like completely different, just define this function outside
Okay.
and make it unrelated.
It's kind of always.
If you wanted to make a function and then make a function in that function should have do something with what getGreeter is doing. It should be helping getGreeter somewhere. This is just an example to see how the parameters are still found or whatever. But that's like good. Like let's say you're writing a huge function and then you have lots of data, you have to do something with it. So you write a big function, and inside that function, you define smaller functions, and then you call it throughout the application. Like set everything to uppercase in this part of the array. So you just call that in different places, but you have to define that inside the function. You know, that's like that is this one, I think. No, it's not, is it? This one.
Yeah. I understand how all the greeters link together functions, but I'm still perplexed by how introduce Mary to is similarity. How does a greeter know that's her name?
But if this word said greeter, it would make sense to me. It's literally the same thing, except you're just calling the variable a different name. And if you look at it, now when you're calling, because like so you agree that these two variables will be equal to this function, right?
Right.
But you're passing in Mary to the first one, and you're passing in Rosalind
That's
to the second
one.
So that's name one. So you know that the console log will be hi Mary, meet whoever.
Right.
So now this naming makes more sense when you read it like this. Introduce Mary to whatever you're passing that function. Introduce Mary to Dorothy. Hi Mary, meet Dorothy. Introduce Mary to Albert. Hi Mary, meet Albert. This is just a naming thing.
But see, in my mind, that would have been hi Dorothy, hi Albert, hi Marla. It's equal to get greeter, Mary.
Well, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just like the names, you know? Like, you understand though that the function, the return function is being assigned to those things,
Right.
and you understand that they're being called with another parameter, right?
No, I see. Because let introduce Mary to equals get greeter Mary.
Get greeter invoked with Mary.
Invoked with Mary.
So now that return function, name2, console log, hi name1, meet name2. The name1 will be Mary.
Right.
So now you call introduce Mary to with Dorothy and with Albert. So now name2 in that anonymous function will be Dorothy and Albert. So now when you read it out loud, like I'm reading this function, introduce Mary to Dorothy, hi Mary, meet Dorothy. That's all that's happening. Yeah, I don't know. If you guys don't have any more questions, I could open up the workshop for you in like 5 minutes, and then you guys can continue. You guys can do that one. Okay? Does that sound good? All right, take 5.